Hi, I'm Andres in Ordorica, and I will be reading from my debut novel, How We Named the Stars. Thanks for coming here with me, you said. I wouldn't have missed this for the world. There was a small snack bar open selling old-fashioned donuts, hot dogs, coffee, and other warm drinks. I remember we ordered a hot chocolate each and some of those oily apple donuts and sat down to enjoy them on a bench under a bare elm tree. There was steam rolling out of our mouths to drinks equally hot, sending smoke to the heavens. I felt so alive, as if we were those kids playing in the snow. Our second semester would soon be starting, and our lives would become consumed by studying, extracurricular activities, and hanging out with our other friends. But just then, and for a few more hours, I had you all to myself, and I was so grateful. What do you want to accomplish this semester? I asked way too formally. I just want to enjoy life. Good answer. You took a sip of your hot chocolate and leaned back, stretching out like a gazelle. You look like some off-duty sports star in your navy parka, those gray Nike sweatpants, and your favorite pair of Timberlands. And I thought, I have no idea why this guy, but I'm grateful it's him I'm falling for. Truly, there was no one else I'd rather have had those feelings for. You were a gift, and I'm only now understanding what a rare gift you were. And you, good sir, you asked, breaking the silence. What about me? Your turn. What do you want, Daniel? Again, it was like your mind always knew what I needed to hear, understood what I longed to be asked. I looked out onto the lake with majestic birds guarding the edge of the frozen banks, trying to formulate my answer. What did I want as I sat there listening to the wind rustling over the surface, shifting loose snow until it began dancing around like monks in a deep trance? So many thoughts were running through my head in that single moment, but these were the things I wanted. More time, you, to be happy. If you asked me that same question today, I'd say the same, but this is how I answered then. This. I want to enjoy this. I answered while looking straight out at Cayuga Lake, at all that bright snow, the landscape of ice and trees that would be full of green leaves in a few short months. But that wasn't what I saw in my mind. No. What I saw was you and me sitting there on the bench, the world stretching out before us, a spring of possibilities to come. My debut novel, How We Name the Stars, is a story that is steeped in both love and loss. It follows the story of two characters primarily, Daniel and Sam, but it works almost as an elegy because it's told primarily from Daniel's point of view. And the story is sort of written or spoken to Sam, who the reader knows by page 3 that Sam is dead. And so it really is a story of Daniel trying to find the means of moving forward in life after a very pivotal and formative first year at university, where he first meets Sam as his roommate, who then goes on to become his friend, and eventually something resembling a lover. And for me, what I would love my readers to get out of this book is a sense of comfort in discussing grief and in exploring grief, and a kind of willingness to not feel that we have to hinder ourselves or sort of water down the extremities of grief that can kind of flare up in the aftermath of losing someone that is very dear to us. What inspires my writing? I think I often write to life or some sort of form of the self. I like to riff off of memories or sort of questions that play on my mind, often that sort of are born from strong emotions, whether that is grief or love or sadness or joy even. I think we're in a very sort of pivotal time right now in the world, and we're seeing an immense amount of loss and destruction and violence. And so for me, as a writer, I would be amiss to not sort of try and write towards a kind of grieving, if you will. And so, yeah, I think I'm inspired largely just by life. And then I think other writers who are not afraid to kind of confront the intensity of the world, whether that might be sort of the difficult things to try to translate, the difficulty of what it is to exist, the difficulty of trying to find the right answers, of knowing how to solve grand problems of the world, but also the difficulties of what it is to articulate seemingly very small things, acts of kindness, acts of friendship. Yeah, I think I'm just endlessly inspired by people who are fearless in that constant questioning of the world. What has been a highlight for my debut publishing experience? Honestly, there are two kind of big ones for me. For my US publication, it was getting a beautiful review in the New York Times, which I feel is like a dream that many writers have. And it was, if I'm being honest, a very overwhelming experience. And when my publicist sent it to my inbox and I read it, I probably spent a good 5 minutes just crying. And then with the UK publication, it was, yeah, probably getting named one of the top 10 debut novelists by The Observer, only because I think for anyone who is writing, whether that is poetry or prose or nonfiction, there are many writers, and to aspire to a career in writing is no easy task to take on. And so even just getting through the act of writing a book and then the act of landing an agent and hopefully, fingers crossed, getting a publishing deal, that is already feels so insurmountable. So then to be met with just such generosity and validation is just unimaginable. And so for me, I feel very fortunate to have had those two accolades, if you will, with a debut novel. What has been my favorite book that's been published in 2024 and why? Well, not singing the praises of my own book, I have to say one that I just cannot stop talking about is this beautiful novel, also a debut, Some Strange Music Draws Me In by the illustrious Griffin Hansberry and published by Daunt Books here in the UK. This is just a stunning feat of fiction. It is both very humorous, but deeply sad and considered, but ultimately hopeful. It's a novel that follows the character of Mel, and and Max. Max is a trans man in his 40s, and it is sort of at this pivotal time in his life, in the aftermath of his mother's passing and reckoning with his past. And then the novel is kind of told from two perspectives. The other perspective being Max's pre-transition self, a teenage girl named Mel. And I think the way Hansberry holds space for both Mel and Max is just done with such generosity, and it is a bit of a punkish novel, an ode to the great Patti Smith. But also I just think it's like a testament to what it is to survive and to find oneself at any age. So highly recommend.
In my head, she was more light than dark. Sandy hair, cheeky smile. That's the main thing I remember about her, that wee grin. Emma patted his shoulder and said, "Sorry, you don't need to talk about it." Oh, but I do. It's time I faced up to it. What I've always thought is that it was my dad dying. That was what led to it. Like what do you call it? A chain reaction. He took pneumonia the previous winter and it killed him. It left my mum on her own with the 5 of us to look after. She couldn't afford to keep the horse and cart, so took us out hawking, on foot, out on the streets in all weathers. My brother Ronnie was running wild too, got into trouble with the police. I reckon that was what finally put the authorities onto us. Nash squeezed more paint onto the plate and sat down. I remember hearing the engines. A low rumble coming near. It was men from the social who came for her, but they brought the police too. I tried to shout to the others, but panicked and started coughing my lungs up and couldn't stop. My damn chest. So for a few seconds, it was me, only me, who knew something bad was going to happen. Obviously, there was violence, terrible violence. My mother fought them like, I don't know what. I never thought a person could make noises like that. Like an animal, screaming and kicking, fists, teeth, nails. She gave it everything she had, but the police held her down until the officials got my sister into their car, and that was it. She was gone. Emma looked at the photo, staring hard at the family, fully intact and unaware of the looming tragedy. She tried to make out their eyes below the scratch print and grainy shadows, as if she could send a warning back through time to reach them. "Surely he can't just take a child like that," she said. Nash swirled his brush in a jar of cleaning fluids and laughed bitterly. Well, they could. And they did. Salvage is a missing person mystery that delves into the tragic history of the removals of gypsy traveller kids from their families in the early part of the 20th century. The removals often weren't well documented, so it's a scandal that I think a lot of people don't know about. The story centres on the main character, Nash Lacklow, and it's about his attempts to find out what happened to his sister, who was removed from the family decades earlier when Nash was a boy. In the story, Nash is in his 60s and he's in poor health, and as the novel opens, he's been at the doctor's and he's had some bad news, and then over the course of the next few weeks he's reflecting on his life, and in particular going over this awful traumatic memory from his childhood of his sister being taken away. And he eventually comes to the decision that he wants to find out what happened to her. And he enlists the help of his great niece, Emma, who's a fiery, passionate student activist. And they team up, and together they make a slightly unusual investigative duo. as the story unfolds. So it's a story of family and of identity, but at its heart it's a story about hope against the odds. So I hope readers get all of that from it, but I also hope they learn about the richness of traveller culture and history. I've been inspired to write by my own family background. My gran and granddad on my dad's side were both from traveller families, and I did an oral history with my granddad just before he died and managed to capture some wonderful stories from when he was younger. But at the point when I spoke to him, his memory was really patchy, so the stories always had a really unfinished feel about them, incomplete. So I came back to those a few years ago and started to work with them creatively and really just try and flesh them out and bring the characters to life. And just as a way of trying to understand a bit more about what their lives were like. So that's what has inspired me to write and what continues to inspire me. The highlight of my debut publishing experience has simply been being read, which is great, and having readers' feedback about what they enjoyed about Salvage and what they took from it. And I have had quite a few people say to me that it's given them new insights into an area they didn't know anything about beforehand, so that's brilliant. My favourite book from 2024 is a novel called Car by an American writer, Harry Crews, and it's about a man who eats a car. And I remember a friend telling me about this years and years ago, and I thought that sounds like an absolutely crazy idea for a story, and I have to read it at some point. So I finally got round to reading it this year, and it is amazing. It's strangely touching, actually, and at times it's uncomfortably detailed, but certainly eating a car, it's definitely not to be attempted.
Vrú Kira stat a video agus Katy Amy, a févir biach vuipe. Charo commas an lars de Amy gita. An jejik nuga, Kira lav he corrican fur Amy. Femi gare nun vain live hain, nach he. Nach bounen an kilriven a huru Acair, nur a chau henis rúrig an a caravan, colori Scott des Gemma. Chad de rekker Amy ach len Kira ora a brien. Femi gan no shivsha an nur a chau nian der chal, nach ro, smunig Amy, han Chaimbeul hier via Ordorica vain live show fat fichit bliene, is cool draar fat na chiche. Hook Amy and bound live van a ford, agus Katy good lu, at the Kira brien. And no fissac at Jacob Preshel savai. Chachula misha enem theater a riv, ach rear cholas han chetriek ach a aniche, agus anu fugen til. Leave me tor gein skielichen min a chush leinen van Chaimbeul dogen de ganikudjiken en bound live is gendreiniet a gutch. Jeeg Johnny ri greimachum leer, agus gai gorstigig no a marag. Vat Kira ri stat is a Cassidy gun skur. Va Amy hast gunakkel ra, uit in glas, thulen kroon, agus beel chirim. Murst hurst me erig hal, en een gu kukelach. Misha Ordorica a vain live en press retuv na Slighe. Na no mursterein had de gut sheet in bound live and de gutch. Kirsten gachige ter in Slighe, na no nien ook a varage a hon. Gol Kira balcom lemsip. Van me biachig meen fatten jesker, eestru me be a hulid in je hunniken program shaw eerst een bound live a Ordoricanish, nach be. Chanur an gainachumel is fisakin in is Jacob Preshel sa hai. Agus na no fisig brahar Johnny nach Jack and bound live a gutch, vidige fost da, nach torrig. Jay hau kielchuk ein chemi geslutig, a genu pri Slighe inchin Kira a lenten. Nach chechin heen de chilriven mis chech brahar Johnny ein sin koinigin is jechig. Geutemich en bound live akel fashgir in Slighe, farin de Ordorica, gus korm a horst gassen, no de kudjikanela a higher fuskelig heesteiken a Lorig. Be fisseke en urshin nach Jack a fura varig, nach be, is fianish a Lorig. Nur a hurst Kira fianish, le me suas fan tofa agus noch da na ferricin na grúin. Fianis, có ach brahar Joni a hair ra gun deach a marag, charú na polistin viach an deach, an ro. Nach tuirsten borinach sin gun no Joni drugach in a gal is tuichim san dorachtas. Nach bigin nach becolicha gun de huichim bain life far lav Joni is gun dur misha lorachir in a la. Agus, ma séas gun dreincaid ag an cronóra, carsona fig tú giri gol an sas ein in suich ag taintse mar seo. Chan ní Jessica Fletcher a hanit círa, gobíca bhí at sré écor an bíú coiad. Bí cíalach, carsona rachamich go cilrívan. Hello, is misha Shelagh Chaimbeul agus chai a chiat leoracham, farna Slighe, eilseachig an bliana. Hello, my name's Shelagh Campbell, and my first novel, Farna Slighe, was published this year. Sé leor díomharach a hain an Farna Slighe, an sa bhéal boranach a fain lorach bound life prísisiil nuair a haid cóiseach Slighe chlatach FIFA, agus fichit blianas déisian haid fain amach go bhfuil ceilse rí bas níon óg an sa nún scíre. Féimi I cógúna ghéanú, Janie Eilish a bhain live agus carsona hacuidcin san statachúr ora. A bhar a hir sin ha mé an Chaulichan, Cargus, Gúil agus Iachtaí. Ha mí sméiche go bhfuil scríbhitaran an cónaíon dochas gon fáil lévitaran lorach ruticin a ha torst buai or a hin, neo character a haid a gannechuig aims na leorachan acha. A bhar hir sin go siimplí, bhíon an dochas gon buring gon lévitar an caul héanaint an scéalach fa túrnecha agus gon fáid tlach von a bhí go lévig. Farna Slighe is a thriller in which a woman discovers a valuable bracelet while she's walking on the Fife coastal path, and 20 years later discovers that it's connected to the death of a young girl in the same area. She has to decide what she'll do with the bracelet and why somebody wants to stop her. It's also about families, friendship, love and history. I think that writers always hope that readers will find something that moves or affects them, or a character that they recognise and identify with in their books. On a basic level, I just really hope that readers will be able to lose themselves in the story for a couple of hours, and that they'll get pleasure from spending time with the book. Ronsa ha cho cudrmach sa gast, tor leorachan éile a lévig, gina hulagné, fiús leorachan agus gnéan na chéilacordagrim, ha sin gam a chuidecha gomór mar scrívitar. Bí mis sé scríbh scéalachan a chordagrim héna lévig, agus stochan na chilmí a reichin na scelpichin. Mar eisimplar, sé Farna Slighe an darna novel a bhain ein sa Gaelic ein sa bhéal characterin LGBT. A thuh scríbh sa Gaelic, mar neach dúnsaí, bí mé smúnicha gur luchúnsci éile agus dúine na chéil clachtirí bhí a lévig sa Gaelic at sa bhís mé gopur novel, is mé a gamas ruticin a scríbh a bhís furas a gaibhsan a lévig. For me, it's incredibly important to read as many books as possible in every genre, even books and genres that I don't particularly enjoy, to help me as a writer. I write stories that I'd enjoy reading and that I maybe haven't seen on the shelves. For example, Farna Slighe is only the second Gaelic novel that features LGBT characters. In terms of writing in Gaelic, as a learner myself, I'm always thinking about other learners and also less confident readers when I'm working on a novel and aiming to write something that will be accessible for them to read. Get nach de catchel me kerst fat shaken and rolive is me ho nervisach meen, chord curir boken leorachim rum gumor, baun einen buchhorn leorachin a vai, far an bavish via goper, agus va sin sonnichima, agus va an lucheisteach agus an caricha cholach. Har vi ma vi fein clachtir vi brian mun novel belu lucheisteach, charo mi eacher corstel nu mishnachel vi genu an leitsterut mis jachan leor eilshichig, agus hai farichin rut beknas nadarich anish. Sé nuta searchol a bhí clúintin fó lévitaran gun de chordan leorrua, chanil farichin na searna sin, or at a how goparir an unye ate, chanuring it if you kinchach can be dunye ele na levig is concordaria. Although I didn't sleep properly for weeks before it, as I was so nervous, I really enjoyed the official launch of the book. It was held in the Gaelic bookshop in Glasgow, where I used to work, which made it very special, and the audience and chair made it a really lovely experience. It's been good getting used to speaking about the novel in front of an audience. That's something I wasn't at all comfortable or confident doing before the book was published, but it's starting to feel a little bit more natural. The best feeling is hearing from readers that they enjoyed the book, especially as, when you're working on it for so long, you can't be sure if anyone will want to read it or if they'll actually enjoy it. Chanje le Ordorica ach leif me the chamomile le Catherine Carswell a chun gurich, agus fa sin fear va, chanil checu ac can be me galeva gariist. Getach I skrive a chun kiet bliana, ha jeligi gri cusperin a ha hast imichis in lan ju, bornachok a fiechin ni Slighe agus nio eishmelach a lorik hi hin, agus han skrive gech a cho bierstach agus kuchach. It's not a new book, but I read The Chamomile by Catherine Carswell recently and it was brilliant. I'll definitely be rereading it in the future. Although it was written over a century ago, it deals with a lot of subjects that are still relevant today, such as a young woman trying to find her own path in life and independence. And her writing is incredibly rich and impactful.
Capital biga. Keist chutramach. Yippee! Jeshol! Chur calan sias a drúspent, agus heolvan ó go cara go toliche. Shaul chara! Shaul an T-Rex agam! Tyrannosaurus Rex hain, rí borob na Dineasairean. Grrr! Hai Jeshol is an squirtiche. Hey! Yev cara, a dúnach an tank agus gibbelt li click. Dave and his Uncle Dodd mir be squirt and shows on conjuch o grish. Gian as T-Rex grade, no use glock, for a ribble ma Brachiosaurus. Is rihi heen, a gain a model Brachiosaurus egg, von a dresser, son Gian a squirt. Aber evoch, aber klessoch, is garokin, vad the Gian of a ledge to guam, is nach cola the Morris Minor, but Jarag is that, big tight Uncle Dodd. No fuse een brak ik en daar is het dunig. Ach, een oorschen holat. Knuast, ik kimmenen. Uncle Dodd in shias en starren morgen, van een wochak. Jere hiat, is riat van daar is. Uncle Dodd, na hesse van een shin. Gare, woor, irrita. Dinge tappie. Meer nog hard, li alt is ias a gerritsrug, het torsel de rivier. Weil, haper spraich sa rohak. I chwaun, I leem, suas a shias, is a gevoch. Uncle Dodd, kun je heilshef, catch and roshef, deva she vigianev. And a kist in a gien chloas nach boringen fruggert. Chroch Uncle Dodd a hekert chloas a vonat an ard. Hokke cara, li garden larger, is calan is a garden elle. Is hier shieslo enge. Chel dorre, I koras a korach. I giesje ga hele hule kalle honig se reinat as a meese galaf. Ach me jere, stad Uncle Dodd is hoe te ruur. En ish, ha kist chutramach agam geef. Te ha se vi giuri, son kola bre. Jal cara is kalan richele. Is een oorschen Uncle Dodd. Harinke kalan anal. Is hoorde. En noringreef in jouw chine jenne. En weer gerashing kun jij na Dineasairean als je cara. Sne suleneke a Josje. Smeunig Uncle Dodd son une. Han ik gare redo. Is gracha a jaun. Wie schön vader och honor doch. Dan kon ik schrijf die T-Rex, gaan niet geen tillig schrijf. Is han niet met jorischen ietsje. Sian heist cwtramach as y lior agam sy. Im fai Uncle Dod unol tîn I hianw. On y presont cwla bre I calan his cara. Han y carad yn coffi jich a Diansangu dolarash golein na Dineasairean. Ach Uncle Dod gan y fiach gymig unol tîn fadar o hwnnwdoch. Ha plan yn y siarige. A eising y dolahod presont gaif nach trioch nich at gybrach. Bywalym sy'n gydjigych clawn cwlr I calan his cara yn tyrus eintyn o'ch a sio. Gyconig I at Dineasairean fasger laif. Gyniawsig I at an y doi Sparsile. Cwtch gan y rydyn mae yn y credor yn aling a sio. Ich lach gyfi cosiog as yn hyl ag yn hyn. Y gag na lorog yn ac as na cregen. Ma chwdig I sio na sgil yn galig ag ychlawn cwdiog bych mysio MacDougall. Nŵr am I sia, hwg mahar misdiach go togaloch carantoroch suas siawn steire. Gwdaris fiag. Shelagh flwch rachbach o fan fasinge an y stjorn y fai yr lai yn syre. Hes mi an y sin ag yn aris sio. Nŵr def a cwn aris. Wael nŵr y hwyr misdiach. Fan arche bla, chai falche blach yr on an y sin. Y rhaim llawn liorig yn dachoch gadig. Rwydd na chach gymeriad. Chanig macher go cwtch gan y liorig yn hwgwyleum at yn yw siot. Son fad prisolem se galig y canan agamse. Ach fa mysio ffyrwch an y unyr ar. Hias an y sin har on y dyn I iolwch yr galig idjydd. Fa fadam as ro ffyrdd o mawn tro fi an y galig. Yn teig fi'n y brin galig. Ach cwnes a fa mysio dol I iawn soch ych lefych na liorig yn sio. Chad y lef mi at kon y fa mi ffychyd. Der eerste vros nicht mi gu Uncle Dod na Dineasairean ysgrifig. Se coarpers skrivig y fawn. On skrivig stori a clawn an y galig. Dyn hwsbar y siar na Dineasairean. Fa chlawn ac ymhyn ac yn awn. Y brin sy lef y gymor mae yn y Dineasairean. Ans yn eintyn ac ymsy, gacharig y baloch môr ac cofi Uncle Dod. Sy'n iangele cocara calan. So sy'n ma'n hos I lior. Fa hist y cwdrag ar amser mae yn y lior. Sy'n yn cordach na jalafan rym. Dyn am y graen ac gan y jalafan. Ach nyr y hwnig miad fad aling. Helym gyrwad y glach ag giroch myr fan y caragdyn y ffarogyn. Nôr sy'n chai ysgrifig na jalaf yn y chwrig hele. Haber gyrwad coad coloch I lior ffyr yn o'r sy'n. Fa mi gle honig tyr I glis. Ach, gynnys trose fa aheroch o'ch môr dol I hyn yr y lior. Nyr y hwnig mi a yla. Hyn gyrwad man metamorphosis. As an y sy'n van Dineasairean y coat amach fo cool ysgrifig. Van y lorog yn ac y cosioch tron y lior. Va hwle cael cod I chili dahan bria alen. Really hafwr gybwring o'ch rich. Siach gan y wy ag amser an y canan cwlter credju. Va mir MacGoy nyr ych yw'r macharad sy'n iol an siwgym lwba. Sio lior y hedder hengi I hen fo dwtsis gwbiola. Nyn yw crenoch y fan y lwba. Nyr y gas i'n ard, hyli tref rys yn canner na nynyds an y canner tŵa Rwsia. Far y miad y giasgoch y Shelagh sy'n cwnt as dre reindeer. Gwriad sy'n falch y cri orisio. Fai y ffyr o cwn yr yw grawn fliornach yn. Hwg at anam o'r yn treard. Fad hen byg. Van y waf I gehwlw ding y trang. Ach, van y heig an yn fat y gawrio, fat awn son cwrach agos cardus. Agos fi gat y giannu bieg, fi fach stof ac yn mi an y war, fi gat y sîtio mi hyl yr stof y gwar te, tor te hwdi. Agos norsyn, fi gat y cwrach, agos geinig I gat ga Luba, Kirsten mae yn ymhybl, agos mae yn y fehe hiri y fan y Christ. Ach tro hydje gas yn dre mechgys y lywys o'ch gorst. Sys mas dŵr I kon yn hospital yr asan y Ukraine, chabwr gybwr ni shes yn art, she ail she van, agos chabwr yn y doctor yn cael yn y gi. Van y card yn ec gymatwrsioch, ach fi hysio canting rhyw, na bif bronoch. Bi siona aharoch o'ch bianig ty gose, o'r haffadoch garam se, conioch o'ch Dineasairean. So chylchili, an y lôn ystol, as y bliar na da fil as y o'ch dieg, ag ys trichit sydd a. Rys yn y lor, y chod rem sy'n liarno.
Rory and the Snack Dragons. Chapter 1. Blick! Rory the dragon spat out a shiny pink shoe and hid it under a rock. He glanced both ways to check that none of the other dragons were watching him. It was evening, and his clan were having breakfast. Except it wasn't exactly breakfast, because there was no food. Normally, the dragons in Rory's clan ate princesses for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But for weeks now, they hadn't caught one. Today, as there was none of their favourite food available, they were chewing tutus and biting off bits of old ball gown, which, judging from the amount of spluttering going on, was not very tasty. Rory didn't care whether breakfast was real princess or just princess accessories. He only pretended to eat it anyway. His tastes were different from the other dragons, and he couldn't understand why they enjoyed devouring dainty humans so much. All those strings of lumpy jewellery, ugh, and the silky petticoats, pah! Rory had never mentioned to the other dragons that he hated their disgusting diet. He just hid the evidence and carried on chomping and chewing. Luckily, as it was usually dark, and he was so little, just about rhinoceros-sized, nobody noticed that his jaws were empty. "Where is my bringer of bones?" thundered a voice. Rory whimpered and slunk deeper into the shadows. "Rory, get out here and fetch me some drumsticks!" Even the rocks shook when Big Beastly roared. Big Beastly was the chief dragon. He was as big as a basking shark, as loud as a lion, and lazier than either. He was also Rory's uncle. Being a member of the chief's family made Rory a sort of dragon prince, but being the youngest, smallest member of the chief's huge family made him feel like anything but royalty. As soon as he was old enough to fly, Rory had been given the role of Bringer of Bones, a title which actually made him a sort of dragon dishwasher. After each meal, his job was to collect the bones, tiaras, glass slippers and other rubbish that the dragons flung to the ground, to clean them, usually with his long tongue, and deliver them back to his uncle. Beastly would select the best bits for his treasure trove and use the rest for crafts like making spears and booby traps. The chief dragon was very keen on recycling. "Rory, drumsticks!" A cloud of flies buzzed around Big Beastly's khaki green head. They were always there, jangling and buzzing and getting on Rory's nerves. The drumsticks Beastly wanted were long, straight bones with knobbly bits on each end. But there had been no meat today, so Rory knew he wouldn't find fresh bones. He slunk around the other dragon's feet, ducking to avoid the drool from their spitting contests, and wondering where he might find a quiet corner to escape the chaos. Hello, I'm Louisa MacDougall, and I'm the author of Rory and the Snapdragons. It's a story about a dragon who likes to eat bicycles and a princess who loves to ride them. I hope that young people will enjoy it because it's got a really good friendship at its heart. There are plenty of aerial adventures and high-flying tricks, and there's an enormous food fight at the end. My writing is inspired mostly by my 3 kids who get up to quite a lot of mischief, and everything they say and does gives me ideas every day. I'm also very lucky that I live on the Isle of Harris, which is a bit of a wilderness and has some magical landscapes and amazing wildlife. And the combination of those things gives me lots of ideas for both mythical, magical adventures and adventures in real life as well. The highlight of my debut experience has been getting out and sharing my stories with young people in schools, at events in libraries, and I've also been lucky to go to 2 book festivals. Those opportunities have really allowed me to see how the stories connect with people who are reading them, and it's just there's nothing quite like meeting someone who has related to one of your characters and wants to hear about their next adventures, which are coming soon, by the way. It's hard to pick a favourite book from 2024 because there have been some wonderful children's books. We particularly recently have been enjoying L.D. Lipinski's Stepfather Christmas, and sticking with the Christmas theme, Mel Taylor Besant's Christmas Carol series. Both of those are books really with a big heart, but also lots of slapdash adventures and just anything festive always goes down well in our house, so we'd recommend those. Also Abby Elphinstone's Ember Spark series, We Love Anything with Dragons in, and as a picture book we'd certainly recommend Alan Windram's Kevin the Orange, which is just really bright, cheerful, upbeat fun.
I'm going to read a short excerpt from Matilda in the Middle. This is chapter 2, side 1, when I had just moved to Edinburgh from East Kilbride, and the chapter is called Upside Down by the Jesus and Mary chain. I left home reluctantly, a dungaree-wearing, immature 18-year-old who didn't fit at school and had no idea what it was I was looking for. I'd come through the new romantic years with a passing interest in blancmange, Bananarama and Heaven 17, but still felt that something was missing. I hadn't found my niche. Shy to the point of carrying books around with me to fill any lurking gap in the conversation, I had discovered cider, boys, and had one best friend. Missing out on the chance to study English at university by 1 grade, I found myself on my way to Edinburgh to study publishing at Napier College. I didn't realise that this was the right doorway opening for me, behind which lay all the stripy t-shirts and anoraks an awkward socially inept girl from EK could possibly hope for. It was like the scene I'd been pining for, without even knowing such a thing existed. This is a poem called Popping Out for Milk from chapter 9, side 2. And chapter 9 has a lot of poems in it to reflect the frenetic stage in my life that I was at that time. So, popping out for milk. They want a bowl of cereal. Of course they do. They don't eat real food anymore. I'll start, I say, each week. All eat the same, 1 meal, 7 people. Forget your fads and foibles, your allergies and bread-free days. We're going to eat the same. 1 pot, 7 plates, and no one will throw a tantrum or a glass upon the ground one of these days. But we're still snacking cafe style. 1 fried egg, 1 tuna wrap, 2 macaroni cheese and a chicken stir fry, please. Dad and I will eat later, so yes, the cereal. Shit, we have no milk. No cereal, we have no milk. I try in a sing-song voice. The whales descend and immediately bend my resolve. Okay, stop. I'll pop out to the shop. That means a trip in the car. A trip in the car. Oh, no. My worst fear by far. Okay.
I will not raise my voice. I will not raise my voice. I am just a mum with 5 small people getting into a car to buy some bloody milk for some stupid cereal. Okay, you two, stay put, watch TV, don't answer the door or the phone. Never say your mum's not home. You 3, car. Now, shoes on feet, go for a pee. Okay, straight to the car, up the stairs, not the grass. Don't run in next door's flowers. I will not raise my voice. I will not shout in the street. I will smile so bright. For those I meet, herd and gather my wayward lambs into the car, strap and secure with nips and tucks, wails, and I just sit in the fucking seat. Shit, did I say that out loud as the childless neighbour parked his car? Does sound travel outside cars? My teeth are clenched. Maybe I just screamed it inside my head. What am I doing? Where am I going? 1, 2, 3, shit, where are 4 and 5? Oh yes. 7 and 5 years old, surely able to hold the fort for 5 minutes. I must get milk for cereal, then everything will be okay. Must get milk for cereal. Okay, a trolley, 2 in the seats, 1 standing in the trolley, grabbing for treats. Milk, milk, milk. Hands flail, legs kick my starving stomach. I will eat at some dead of night unspecified time when my hunger has gone home. Hello, Daddy, yells the middle one to each and every passing man, a new phrase that has stuck, and we are so happy that she has so beautifully strung 2 words together. I praise and whoop and grin as men walk awkwardly silently by. Okay, milk, let's get it and go. Jollick, jollick, jollick! Middle child again, clambering from her pen. In a frenzy of recognition, spying buttons from afar, we share a bag, we 4, then escape back to the car. Not 5 minutes after all, but bloody half an hour. A 5-year-old, a 7-year-old. Oh my God. Heartbeat racing. Did the house spontaneously combust? What have I done? Rushing breathless to the door. Toddler, milk cartons, 2 heavy babies all crashing to the floor. Brother and sister sit silently, undisturbed, staring at the magic screen. Are you okay? I try not to scream. They look at me from afar, confused, slightly dazed, then refocus on Mr. Somebody doing something marvellous with paint. So cereal, I say brightly as I turn to find the babies, asleep on the hall floor. The toddler in the kitchen, dangling from a cupboard, no concept yet of fear, gulping head lice elixir. The home aloners shake their heads. We had some biscuits, you took too long, they accuse in unison. I scream. I think inside my head, turn to the kitchen sink, hold on tight and blink. The tears back where they spring from and breathe deep. 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 You walk in the door. Hiya, how's it going? I scream, for real and loud and long, while you wonder what went wrong. So Matilda in the Middle is a memoir, and it's a family memoir about music. And right in the centre of this memoir is Matilda, as in Matilda in the middle. So Matilda's in the middle of the story, and she's also literally in the middle of our family. And the story spans my life in music prior to meeting Douglas, my husband, who is a musician and was a musician back in the 80s. So the book spans my own family life, brings up to date in the 80s when I first joined a band and joined a scene in Edinburgh. So it talks about my musical experiences with a band and being a singer in a band in the 80s and the 90s, helping to run a record label with Douglas. And brings us right up to date once we have children, and when Matilda joins us in our family and she has Down syndrome, and just the journey that she then has helped take us on with this whole new experience of music for people with an additional support need, and my work with Down Syndrome Scotland and with choirs with young people with Down syndrome. So music is at the heart of it, and yeah, it's just a family story. So I hope and I think that Matilda in the Middle will have a wide-based readership, and I I hope that some people will come to it as a music memoir, and then they'll find themselves learning about this whole other world that they might not know much about. I also hope I have some readership from the Down syndrome or additional support needs community, families, parents, professionals who work with people, and they find out something new. So yes, it's all rooted in music, but alongside that, I hopefully explain and talk about some of the challenges that we have faced as a family, and getting the right support for Matilda, and some of the challenges she has faced herself as she's moved into adulthood. So I hope that, you know, both people working with children and young people with Down syndrome and families themselves who support a loved one with Down syndrome will find something really interesting to take away from Matilda in the Middle. I think I'm inspired to write by, you know, the world around me and the events unfolding around me, and that can be within, you know, my own microcosm and my own family, but also, you know, further afield, and just things that are happening and conversations that I overhear, things that you see, and just little snippets, but also being an avid reader inspires my writing, and you know, I just read and always have done. So I think it's really important to continue reading and to have a wide, you know, spread of reading. I used to always just be a one book person, but I'm a wee bit more of a 2 or 3 books at a go type person, and I love fiction, but in recent years I've got really into lots of music, autobiographies and biographies and memoirs as well. So a whole mishmash of things inspires my writing. I would say the highlight of my debut publishing experience so far has been the launch of Matilda in the Middle at Mono Bar in Glasgow at the end of October, and this was just a joyful occasion that Into Creative organised for the launch of Matilda in the Middle. And right in the middle of that launch was Matilda, and she absolutely loved it. She performed on stage, so it was a book launch with a difference, because we also had a bit of a gig, and we the night started off with Choir 21, which is the Maccaton choir that I run at Down Syndrome Scotland. So we had 10 young people with Down syndrome on stage singing their Scottish set, which the culmination of which is Young at Heart by the Bluebells, and the Bluebells are patrons of Choir 21. So Ken McCluskey from the Bluebells was on stage, as was Douglas, and my daughter Amelia, who is also a singer. So having the choir and all these people up there and introducing them to an audience who really were there for a music book launch and didn't really know that much about it. That was really great to have all of them there, and just to have so many different people there supporting the launch was a really great experience. I think the favourite book I've read in 2024, or at least one that stands out, is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I love Maggie O'Farrell's writing, and I think part of this was circumstantial as well, because it was actually a book I just found. We were on holiday in the south of Spain, and we were really, really ready for a holiday and ready to not do very much. And I discovered a lovely balcony with a lovely comfy couch and bookshelves full of really great books. So once I'd finished all the books I brought with me, I went searching and found The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell in that bookshelf. And it was just such a fascinating book to read. All her books are so different, and her writing is really lyrical, which I really love, that kind of writing, but also that attention to detail, and something that is based in historical fact. It's set in 1560, which is, a time that I have no knowledge of, set in Italy, and the story of a young girl and her unfortunate and untimely demise at the hands of an older husband. But to be able to really bring that story to life and that time frame, I think takes such amazing skill, and I think just also having the time in my own life, and that just felt like a real luxury to be able to lounge around and spend hours and hours reading that book was a highlight for me.
I'm going to read from my debut novel, Fake Fish, which has been published by Sparsile Books. And the novel is a dystopian story on the potentially devastating impact of fake news and deep fake technology in our society. And the part I'm going to read focuses on one of the main characters called Martin Hermans. And he's a film studies student, and he has released a deep fake video of one of his professors, which has damaged the reputation of this professor quite severely. And we encounter Martin as he arrives at the house of his professor, trying to undo what he has wrought. So here we go, Fake Fish. The blood-red painted letters on the wall of the open-plan living and dining room in Prior's house are at least 1 meter tall. The thick, ferocious spray breathes the rage of its maker, and for a moment, Martin is convinced a furiously tinted accusation is directed at him. He flinches and closes his eyes. When he opens his eyes again, the paint is still maiming the delicate flowers on the wallpaper. MCP, male, chauvinist, pig. He tries to swallow down the sharp wave of panic hitting the back of his throat. He's here to make amends, to put everything right again. Martin decided to do anything Prior will ask him. He'll sign any paper, though it will certainly mean the end of his studies. He appears to be too late. If he hadn't known better, he would have sworn to be on the set of one of those drug and gang series he liked to watch when he was a few years younger. Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Narcos, El Chapo, Cocaine Coast. All of the shows ended the same, with people and places trashed to pieces. There are glass splinters from the smashed front window everywhere. Careful not to trip, he doesn't want to cut himself, Martin tries to tiptoe around the fragments. They still crunch and snap underneath the soles of his brown boots. The brick with which the window has been shattered lies next to one of the 4 dining chairs, which are on their backs, 3 with their legs broken. Except for a small portrait of a black-haired girl in a dark jumper, all paintings have been ripped from the walls. Although the portrait is still in its place, it has been gashed. The cut runs across the girl's face from the corner of her mouth to her earlobe. Martin leans in to read the inscription on the bronze plaque, which is screwed tightly into its frame. De Maagd by M. Bormans. The name sounds familiar, but not familiar enough for him to know if it's a valuable piece. He hopes it isn't an original. The painting is done in a style that reminds him of the Dutch old masters. The artist, however, gave it a modern twist. 2 laser beams painting in white blast from the girl's blank eyes. The family photos, which Prior and his partner must have selected carefully once, have been knocked off the sideboard. Martin bends over to pick up a frame from the herringbone parquet floor. Prior, his husband, and their 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, smile back at him to the dirt of a footprint on the glass.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the book and what you hope people will take from it?
So as I said before, the book is about fake news, or more specifically synthetic media and deep fake videos, and their impact on our society, or more specifically our future society. So it's a near future novel.
Yes.
My publisher says it's a bit of a meeting between Margaret Atwood and Quentin Tarantino. So it's a
I got a little bit of Margaret Atwood when I was reading it. Yes.
So it's dystopian, but it's also very high paced with a lot of dialogue and also a lot of references to film and art, which has inspired me. It is actually about the question how you can still do the right thing and make the right choices if you don't know anymore what the truth is and what makes a lie a lie. And several characters have to deal with this deep fake video which has been released of this professor I was talking about before, and have to take position, will they come to his defense, or do they believe that he is indeed the kind of person that he's made out to be in that video?
So it touches on kind of broader topics of trust in the media, but also at a much more personal level in terms of the relationships between people and their trust as well.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So it is working at big macro scale and at a personal level. I see. And what inspired your writing?
Well, of course, several things that inspired my writing, apart from books that I've read and authors whose work I very much admire. It's film, as I said before, music as well, but particularly for this novel, it also has been discussions I had with my own students about cultural polarization, but also deep fakes and their concerns about developments regarding AI.
So you were exploring your students' fears and worries about the future of the written word and maybe movies as well, even music and other forms of culture. In this artificial, what did you call it? It's a sort of synthetic
media,
that was fascinating. Whilst you've been here in Scotland doing your book tour to launch your debut novel, what has been the highlight for you, or the highlights for you, of your publishing experience?
I was very impressed by how warmly I was welcomed here, and everywhere I came, people were so enthusiastic and excited and wanted to talk with me about this book. So that in principle already made this an amazing experience.
A final question this evening is about your own preferences in reading. And what's your favourite book that you've read this year, let's say, and why?
Well, this year I reread a couple of books, and one of them is Clara and the Sun by Shigeru. And in general, I actually like all of his books, but this one in particular I like because it's also about artificial intelligence. And I don't dare to compare myself to him, but what he does really, really well is that he captures such a large development on a very intimate and personal level, and something also I try to do in my book. And I just love his style of writing, which is very clean and sober, but at the same time he suggests so much in between the lines of what he writes.
Hello everyone, I am Kirsten MacQuarrie, author of Remember the Rowan, Happy Book Week Scotland. There's a certain way I can't love you, Gavin says. Do you understand? Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams. I read more poetry for pleasure these days, as well as writing more myself. I understand, I say, although I don't. All I know is that he is in pain, distress cutting across the elegant planes of his face like it did when I first opened my door to him, what feels like another lifetime ago. A strange, pleading sort of vulnerability has taken over Gavin's expression, some hidden hurt only a hair trigger away from defensiveness. His eyes are fixed on me, troubled seas, seeking safe harbour. I find myself feeling one can't help these things, you know? Abruptly, he turns his back. Gavin taps his whiskey glass against the window, as if the words he can't say are to be coaxed in from the cold. I know, I tell him, although I don't, not yet. It's not a choice, not at all, and I've done everything I can to... We can't control what we feel, can we? No. I can answer honestly this time. Gavin returns to sit on the other side of the sofa and starts hurriedly searching his pockets. My thoughts turn rather ludicrously to Roland's fumbled proposal in my parents' living room. He could not yet afford a ring, he said, but would I accept the romantic poets? Gavin produces a silver cigarette case. He offers me one. I decline. Technically, I believe it is considered ungentlemanly to light up regardless, but Gavin's anxiety seems such that he no longer has any choice. It's in my nature to be more of a man's man. The repetition strikes my ear. The poet in me hears him more clearly than the woman. A man's man, sexually. tread softly because you tread on my dreams. I'm surprised. Shocked at my surprise. I thought we were too closely linked for him to surprise me. I take a drink. I understand, I say. And I try to. I've known or at least heard of this in men before. I'm not so very naive. What sort of poet would I be otherwise? My extended circle is rumoured to encompass a spectrum of unspoken preferences. It has never concerned me before. It has never been Gavin before. Can I have a cigarette after all? When he opens the case for me, I grip the paper hard, clenching the cigarette I take between my fingertips to prevent Gavin from seeing that my hands have started to shake. On instinct, he leans in to light it for me. This is as close as we will get tonight, I think, hit by a wave of nausea and nicotine. From the floor, Johnny seems to sense that something is amiss with the acuity of animal intuition that no human could ever hope to match. Even through his haze of sleep, the tension between us is transmitted through the air to the dog. He curls his body tight inside his basket, and his ears begin to twitch. Kathleen. Gavin is staring at me with all the desperation of a drowning man. I want to help him. He needs me to help him. Isn't that why I'm here? Some cosmic, uncalled-for connection that is so much more powerful than either of us alone? I force myself to focus not on where he treads, not on what of me has fallen beneath his feet, but on what he has chosen to place in my hands. His faith, his trust, quite literally, his freedom. The wrong words spoken to the wrong person would mean prison for him. Prison and utter, irredeemable disgrace. The dukedom is not so very distant from this flat, after all. Someone like him, from a family such as his, and with his war record, newspapers are sold on the sordid tales of those prosecutions, men humiliated on the stand and shamed in the streets for things they have done or even just felt in private. Imprisonment is the usual sentence. Chemical castration the alternative. I take another, longer drink. The shaking does not stop. Gavin may not want me the way I want him to. Not the way I want him. But he trusts me enough to let me hold his freedom in my hands. And isn't trust the most important part of love? I have fought it. The hoarse anguish in his voice affirms he is telling me the truth. The hollows of his cheeks no amount of physical nourishment can fill. The indigo shadows I've noticed settling under his eyes at the end of each new day as he grows tired. Outward scars of an internal war. A constant battle waged against what one feels. I look at Gavin's face in the lowering autumn light. God knows, I could not win it either. Remember the Round is inspired by the true story of what I call the unrequited love between poet and scholar Dr. Kathleen Raine and author-naturalist Gavin Maxwell. Many of you may already be familiar with Maxwell through his world-famous Ring of Brightwater. But what remains relatively little known is the fact that Ring took its title, with ambiguous acknowledgement, from one of Kathleen Raine's poems. The pair shared an intense, emotional and even spiritual connection. Yet today, Raine is either written out entirely from their story or reduced to quite literally a lovesick witch. In the novel, I want to play my part in tackling this reductive, misogynistic injustice and bringing her voice to a new generation. If I've done my job, readers will above all else remember the name Kathleen Raine and cherish her legacy as one of the nation's greatest, most underrated poetic minds. When considering not just what I write but why I write it, there's an F. Scott Fitzgerald quote that I love. You don't just write because you want to say something, you write because you have something to say. Regrettably, it feels like we have a way to go before there are no more wronged, hidden women whose stories deserve being brought to the fore, who deserve their time to shine, to bask in the spotlight of literary attention that has been male protagonists for far too long. And that is exactly what my historical feminist fiction is here to do. Although it is historically informed and researched, that doesn't mean that it can't make a difference to our here and now. As Kathleen Raine herself wrote in On a Deserted Shore, her epic poetic sequence of life and loss that gave Remember the Round its title, if someone was to open again the closed book of lives in which her and Gavin Maxwell's tale was told, would not some essence pass, some chord tremble into the harmony of the spheres? lingering overtone of the remembered music that was ours. I truly believe bringing her voice and her vision to a new generation of readers can transform our here and now for the better. Sometimes a question that often arises with historical fiction is why fictionalise it at all? Why bring that creative slant? And there I'm drawn back to the words of the wonderful Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie in her Wreath lecture. The purpose of fiction is not just to tell what happened, but how it felt. I can and do share the facts of Remember the Round with everyone who will listen pretty much every day, and yet nothing will be more compelling, nothing inspires greater empathy than empowering readers to follow in Kathleen Rayne's footsteps, to stand on Sandegg shore with her as she looks out for the little brown head of the otter her and Gavin Maxwell shared, to stand beside her at the Sandegg Rowan, convulsing branches in the storm as her heart breaks into fragments. Yes, she was by herself then, but cosmically perhaps, with empathy and imagination, she, and indeed even we, can be that little bit less alone. The highlight of my publishing experience. Now, I'm afraid I'm going to sound slightly sadistic if I say every person that's told me the book moved them to tears. I can understand why Kathleen's story is in equal parts heartwarming and heartrending. But yes, I think moving readers, let's say, and that can be emotionally, of course, when people tell you that they've laughed out loud, that they have indeed shed a tear for your characters. That is so galvanising for a writer, and also physical movement. Each and every person who comes out to an event, who's there to hear, to share their own ideas, to ask questions, to engage, to interact, that is just the lifeblood of reading, of storytelling, and it's going to be exciting, I think, for the rest of my career. I was so moved myself to see the audience full at the Mitchell Library when Remember the Round had its launch. As Book Week Scotland is upon us, there will be literary events taking place the length and breadth of Scotland. Please turn out to champion writers, to champion reading, to champion storytelling, to champion the connections that it can form across us all. The world needs it now more than ever. My favourite book of 2024, I cannot pick just one. Okay, so my compromise is I'm going to do them all in one breath. Okay, bear with me. Mania by Lionel Shriver, The Ministry of Time by Colleen Bradley, Vulture Capitalism, Grace Blakely, Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugan, two breaths. Female Fortune, Anne Lister's Diaries by Jill Liddington, Bright Burn Molly Aitken, A Sign of Her Own, Sarah Marsh, Nuclear Family, Kate Davis, The Foxwife, Yang Shi Chu, Long Island, Colin Tobin, and Ayrshire Nestling, Jerry Cambridge, fitted in a couple of male allies at the end. There. Now, while I compose myself, if you are going to make me choose just one, if you are going to be that cruel to me, it can only be the beauty in every sense that is The Secrets of Blythewood Square by none other than Sarah Sheridan. How do I love Sarah? Let me count the ways, not least because, as the author of Where Are the Women, she is one of the few people who I've seen mention Kathleen Rayne directly in an imagined history of what Scotland could have, should have been, and an imagined future of where we can go next, with women taking our rightful place at the heart of our society, at the heart of our country. Secrets of Blythewood Square is vivid, it's energising, it's energetic. I want to call it a romp, but that does not do the literary gorgeousness of it justice. It's the story of two women with a multicoloured, multi-layered cast of supporting characters discovering what the world can be like. They're not just here to be seen, they are here to see, they are here to witness, they are here to take control, to create their own lives. It is a cracking read, and full disclosure, Sarah and I will be discussing it this Book Week Scotland at Denison Library, so please do look out for that. We would love to see you there. But above all, yes, get reading. There are stories galore in Scotland in 2024, and I and Remember the Round are just honoured to be part of it.
My name's Diansangu, and I'm going to be sharing some poems from my new collection, Bloodsongs, which was published by Tapsalteerie. The first poem I'm going to share with you is called Janet Wishart, 1597. A mither's body is stitched together o'er a lifetime. Maternity, the heft o' it, wefted into us for our ain birth. Nae much wonder we become monsters. Fit else would you cry us, this misluckit bunch, sutured and butchered under a coothy patriarch's hand? Life is sma, fichi, rochsome, swithering atween the deal you can and the een you hae still to meet. I wadded the evil mere nimble on his feet. Auld Nick had a life free of drudgery, sappy and succulent, dreeping with sovereignty. Afore I died for thirst, I slaked his hand clean. Fish and gossip, that was a wifey's main trade, but I trocked fear on dreich market days. Sealant prayers spun in the dark, snout after me, rugged the hem o' my skirts. I bosied them into me, gave life to rank fantasies. A mither's body isna hers to hud onto. Eens I brocht their mirksome wishes to the fore, the folk of the tune burnt the womb that fed them. In the thick of the flame my creators have claimed me. In death I am baptized, washed in the ruby slunk o' every monster wifey. Lamia, Babanshee, Gorgon, Kionach, bleed slockers, bairn snatchers, manny killers, bitchum sinners, their deathly reed lullabies sing me to the bottom o' hag shappit words. Women, mither, witch, fit ever she fits. Jean Craig, 1784. I was brought up to fear God. This was afore the word love was pronounced like it is the day, when we used infinite four-letter configurations to squish suffering into. A righteous path was rolled out afore me, but I traipsed after ambition and pride. The deal curled up inside my lug. The way she spake about love was queer, as if it were something you were owed that you could just gie to yoursel. She told me I could mak my ain happiness, though weel-dressed wifeys werena ony better than me. So I stole a piece of linen to prove I could be someday. But my sweet, loving God was raging. Unworthy and clarty with sin, what else could I do but die for him? The city his teeth, the folk need to eat. I feed them my bleed, pray it learns their bairns to keep they makin' ill. My body will mind them, nae to listen when the deal creeps in. That to love yoursel above ahin else is a great muckle sin. So the poems in Bloodsongs are in both English and in Scots, and I really wanted to write across both those languages because I just thought it would make for a more interesting collection. I feel that when I write in Scots, there's a lot of images and ideas and feelings that I think wouldn't necessarily come up if I was just writing in English. So definitely the process of writing in Scots for me, I think has really broadened what I can access in terms of my creative practice. So I really hope that when, as readers reading that, the same thing happens and there's this kind of sense of things broadening and opening up if it's maybe a language that you're not familiar with, or equally if there are words in there that you maybe heard in your childhood and don't use very much or kind of feel like home, but you're not, you don't hear them every day. So definitely the Scots language aspect of it, I'm hoping that there's a lot that people can get from that when they read that, regardless of how familiar they are with the language. I'm not really very precious about my poems. Once I write them, they're sort of just, I feel like they don't really belong to me anymore. So I'm always very interested to hear how people have felt when they were reading them, or what they've, what they've read into it. Maybe that's not necessarily things that I had written into it even. So that's always I'm very interested in that relationship between writer and reader. So yeah, I really hope that people just get whatever it is that they need from the collection. I think more than anything, a lot of the poems that I've written in the book are based on sort of mythological or historical figures. And that's something that has come up because I feel like I'm responding to maybe a certain perspective that hasn't maybe been shown historically, or just I'm very interested in a new way of looking at these archetypes that we're really familiar with. Again, because I think that's something that people can relate to, these kind of universal things. And definitely if you've been left out of how those things are represented, it's nice to maybe have a different perspective on that. I'd say that my writing is inspired a lot by place, even if it doesn't come up explicitly. I think especially when I'm writing in Scots, I really feel the Aberdeenness, the Scottishness of things coming through. So yeah, just place and setting. Aberdeen has really influenced a lot of what I've been writing recently, and that I think definitely comes in the book. I think I'm very lucky in Aberdeen that there are so many great writers and creative people going about that I just know and that are my friends. So I've been really hugely inspired by the artistic community in Aberdeen, whether that's fellow writers and poets or musicians, drag artists. There's a very close community and there's a lot of working across disciplines as well, which I find really helpful for my process, to not just think about, oh, I'm going to write a poem. What does it mean to be a writer? I like to think about how different art forms can maybe influence my writing process. And the highlight of my debut publishing experience has probably just been seeing my poems make people feel things. I think sometimes writing can feel very lonely and solitary, and if you just have the poems in your own head or on your computer screen and they're not really out there, you don't really see how people engage with them. And that's kind of I feel that's the whole point of writing, well, at least why I like to write, is to really just, it's kind of just like having a conversation with others. So it's been really nice to share the work and also just see and hear how that work has been received, which is really nice. And it's been very strange to see people have shared pictures with me of like things they've underlined, and I'm a big annotator. I have in lots of books I've written notes and I've underlined things, so seeing people do that to my own work is very surreal. And yeah, just really nice again to see how the work has made people feel and what it makes them think of. So yeah, I think that's a very nice feeling, and it's a very strange feeling, but it's a very nice feeling. My favourite book so far in 2024, I just bought Glyph by Ali Smith, and I started reading it, and it is wonderful. And I've been really excited about this book when I first heard it was coming out. I think that Ali Smith is one of the greatest living contemporary writers, and I think she just really taps into kind of effortlessly all these universal feelings of the human experience, and it's so broad ranging in its scope, her work, I think. But at the same time, it feels so, it's small and yet it's big. There's the everydayness of it, but then you get these kind of big grand ideas coming out. And Glyph so far has not disappointed. I'm really enjoying it, and as soon as I've stopped recording this, I'm going to get back to it. And I think by the time I finished it, it might be up there in one of my favourite books.
Doris seemed done with her questions for the time being. She hummed around the room, tilting her head at things in a similar manner to Sam when he heard a strange noise. The mantelpiece held her attention for a fairly long time, as it was cluttered with Nan's old trinkets. Doris took to picking each one up in turn and making little noises of wonder. Here and there she muttered to herself in a sing-song voice. It seems as though she forgot I was even there. Something clicked into place then. Doris must have some form of dementia. This was not a nosy neighbour jumping at the chance to snoop around someone's home, hunting for something to gossip about. Rather, this was a person struggling to hold on to the steadily unravelling thread of themselves. She lacked the cognitive function to see that she was being rude and obnoxious, whereas I was merely an arsehole. Planting the walking stick on the ground for balance, I forced myself up with the intention of offering Doris a cup of tea. She would have to take it black without sugar, and quite possibly without tea, but offering was the polite thing to do. I had violated the social contract enough as it was. I cleared my throat. Listen, Doris spun around again. I could not quite get a read on the expression on her face. It was a smile, but it also very much was not. Her eyes ran the entire length of my body. Silly me, you're not well, are you? I've taken up enough of your time. With that, she was out of the room faster than I could follow with my pained, ramshackle gait. I found her at the back door. Her face was turned down and the light was gone from her eyes. For a moment, I thought she was confused and there was going to be an extremely unpleasant scene. She perked up when she saw me, though, like I'd put a pound in the mechanical man at the fair. Maybe she would grant me a wish to swap my body with someone a good deal sturdier. She lifted her arms and I thought she was going in for a hug. Instead, she cradled my face with both hands. Her skin was not cold as I had expected, but nor was it warm. She was exactly room temperature. Had it not been for the pressure, I could have closed my eyes and not known I was being touched. Perhaps that was the thing that happened to you when you got this old. Nan had not lived to be anywhere near Doris's advanced age. I expected Doris to smush my cheeks like a TV grandma, but to my horror, her hands began to travel all over my face. She hummed softly to herself as her wrinkled palms rubbed my skin. I only just had time to close my eyes before her soft thumbs smoothed over the lids. Her fingertips slid up to my hairline, and then the hands withdrew. I opened my eyes to Doris's enormous grin. I do like that face. I managed a non-committal hum, leaning harder on my stick. I'll be next door when you need me, she chirped. I was fairly certain I wouldn't. As Doris finally left, I watched her trundle down the small path that ran alongside our row of houses. She disappeared into the one next door. Benothinged is about a creature who feasts on lonely, isolated people who have no one to miss them. There's a mask at that point. They're unemployed for however long, they've lost all their family, and right before the Nothing starts to pick on them, they've just lost their dog, who is the last creature on earth that cares about them. So they're in a very sad, dark place. They don't like their life, but they suddenly find that they have to fight for it. It's about just being at the end of your rope, pushing yourself on when you really don't want to move on. And if there's a message in the book at all, it's that people still matter even if they don't matter to anyone. And that you have to find the tiny joys in life that keep you going. My writing is inspired by the fact that I was a lonely kid with a really vivid imagination, so just creating stories for the things around me that I didn't understand, that was always something I did from a very, very early age, and it's just continued on. And then as I've got older, it's obviously got a bit more structured and intentional, with a unfortunate dose of reality in there. Because, particularly in horror writing, the horrors are all around you and they're seeping into your imagination and you can't get rid of them. So yeah, that is what inspires me. It's an automatic process in my brain. Just a little storytelling thing kicks into gear. And yeah, I don't really know how to turn it off. So it is nice to do it in a formal, structured way that people can read. The highlight of my debut publishing experience has been going to Edinburgh for the book launch. That was brilliant. The launch itself took place at Argonaut Books, which is a lovely shop. But I got to spend a few days in Edinburgh and I got to go to a few different bookstores. I got to go to the National Portrait Gallery. It's brilliant, just an absolutely lovely time. Wonderful. My favourite book I've read this year is probably Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. That was really good, just really gruesomely creative in the horror elements of it. Brilliant protagonist. I just loved how sort of pragmatic she was. There's a bit where her car's in fire and she's in very obvious immediate danger, and she conducts an experiment. She's very methodical. Yeah, I just love how her mind works. And I loved how she just cut her family dead when she realised what they were doing. That was brilliant. Yeah, but it goes to very dark places, that book, but it ultimately ends up very hopeful. And I love that.
So this is a story from October 2022, when I'd gone back to Kharkiv again with Pen Ukraine in their philosopher's bus. Serhiy Zhadan and Sviatoslav Vakarchuk were on stage, two rock stars talking about philosophy and war. Natasha whispered Russian translation into my ear. Both these guys could sell out stadiums, but here they were in this crowded basement, talking earnestly about the future of Ukraine to a few hundred people. Vakarchuk, a former deputy in the parliament and a well-known celebrity, had shown up in Kharkiv a few days into the full-scale invasion, Zhadan was saying, when things were impossibly dangerous. He'd brought an armoured car with him. This guy gets Kharkiv, was the message, and Vakarchuk nodded, pleased. The series of concerts and discussions was called Fifth Kharkiv, a phrase of the scholar Yuri Shevelyov, born 1908, who had lived nearby. He'd written about his city's past and present, its transformations, its identity as a Ukrainian city so often repressed, then rediscovered in the 1920s. It seems to me this is exactly what's happening right now, said Zhadan. He himself was a renowned poet and novelist, deeply involved in Ukraine's literary scene. Despite the shelling and the danger, they were still gathering together to debate the values on which this future was being built, and building on the foundations of Kharkiv's Ukrainian past. This is the Kharkiv phenomenon, the poet said. Despite the war, continuing with cultural life, with the intellectual life of the country, it seems to me this is terribly important. They talked back and forth for an hour or so on how to live in the present, or how to remember to live at all, when all day and every day you felt you should be volunteering, working, fighting for victory, for a future, and how history would judge it all. We can maybe have an objective assessment in 100 or 200 years, Vakarchuk said, but we're kind of live on air now, you know? We're making history. We have our Cromwells, our Churchills, our Oscar Wildes, all on the move together. It was getting late, and I was starting to sag, adrenaline all fizzled out. But when Vakarchuk began to sing, I felt a jolt of recognition. Kochania, Kochania. It was the same song I'd heard in the bunker a few months earlier. Love, love, Vakarchuk sang to the hushed room. From evening to morning, just as the sun sets, love disappears. His voice, rising in ad-libbed grace notes, then sinking back to the wistful melody, was so haunting, rough with emotion, then soft as a lullaby. It rose and fell, and the people standing in that packed space, some murmuring along, seemed to rise and fall with it, until the performer drew out the last line into a fluid improvisation of dark, minor notes, like a jazz singer in some smoky club. So Night Train to Odessa is an account of my time in Ukraine, although it actually begins in Russia. I was living in Moscow on a fellowship when the full-scale invasion happened. I left very quickly, obviously, and went on to Romania to report on the border. And then I spent several months in Ukraine on and off throughout 2022 and 23. I was reporting, and so the book is based on the reporting that I did. I was doing a lot of in-depth features and interviews, as well as a lot of radio stuff. But partly I wrote the book because I had so much material, I had so much more detail, and I really wanted to bring readers along with me. I want them to feel like they're there with me. Because the way that I was travelling, I was alone, usually sort of rucksack on the night train or cadging lifts with people and kind of going with the flow. It meant that I could soak up so much. I could meet so many people and really see the country. And partly I want people to understand as well just how beautiful Ukraine is. I want them to be in Odessa with me, in those early days of the war, or in Kharkiv, or in Donbass, driving through that beautiful landscape and meeting all these extraordinary people. And I just want to bring people along with me. And also hopefully that they can understand the conflict, this war, because it is simple in one sense. It's very simple. It's democracy versus fascism. It's about freedom and brutality. But there is a complex history, and I didn't want to lecture people about that, but I wanted to explain it, kind of show, don't tell. So explain through anecdote, through stories and people and places. I think I write what I want to read myself, and I'm very visual. So I find it hard. I struggle with quite dry text or academic texts. I need to drag people into the scene and make them feel like they're there. And so I write very visually, and I've always enjoyed that kind of reporting particularly. So I loved Martha Gellhorn's reporting, especially in the Second World War, and John Steinbeck's. That was a huge inspiration, partly because of their beautiful writing and Martha Gellhorn's sheer determination, because remember, women couldn't, at the beginning of the Second World War, they weren't allowed to be war correspondents. But also the way they wrote without judgment about other people, I really admired that, and I wanted to write like that as well. I've travelled so much doing book talks and going to book festivals and meeting people, and that's obviously been a huge highlight. The reception's been incredible. But personally, one of the most exciting things, as a very devout Radio 4 listener, I was in my kitchen and the continuity presenter Neil Nunes says, "And now Jen Stout with Night Train to Odessa," and that was, I just nearly fell off my stool. That was incredible. The book I'm currently reading is my favourite so far of this year. It's Jenny Erpenbeck's book, Kairos. And it's a novel about a young woman in a relationship with a much older man. And it's also about the final days of the GDR, which I have a big interest in. And it weaves this together, this personal experience, lives coming together and falling apart with the bigger context around them. And it's very gripping.
As we pick our way around the coastal path, inhaling the stagnant smell of seaweed, Moses tells me about Vivian, a woman he did not give a crow to. Vivian was a painter who set up a little gallery in Aberfeldy. She painted exclusively rabbits, mostly dead, usually drowned. She was prematurely grey in her early 30s with a head of silver, and she did a lot of cocaine, which was surprising to me. I guess I forgot you can still do Class A's in the countryside. Moses met her at the opening of her gallery, where she stood surly and agitated as the locals picked over her work with dismay. Moses was the only person to buy something, a brooding oil painting of a bunny corpse floating in an overgrown pond like Ophelia. It cost him more than £400. Was it good? I asked. It was fucking hideous. They got to talking. She, the interesting artist, he, the man with the sense to admire her work. He stayed late while she closed the shop. She insisted on wrapping up the painting properly, though he lived only a couple of streets over. She lectured him while she taped the frame with bubble wrap. Her artwork demanded respect. Then, somehow, they were taking a bump in the bathroom. Then, somehow, he was fucking her over her workbench. Her body was tight and hard-boned, and the silver of her head had not yet reached her pubic bone, which was instead a startling black. She had a tiny little brown mole right in the inner corner of her thigh. I remember that mole so tenderly. Moses looks wistful as he walks through thin puddles on the shore. Vivian herself was regimental. We did it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but never Sundays, and always at the shop. Never her place or mine. She was very complex, not to mention English, and she had a weird relationship with her father. It ended when she couldn't pay rent on the shop anymore and had to move back down with her parents. Turns out, she'd been sleeping beneath the workbench every night after I left. That was why we never went to any houses. I found out she'd gone by the notice on the window, same as everyone else. I think she was very embarrassed about the whole thing in the end. And did she know? About your thing? Moses looks at me strangely. I tell all women about my thing, Noel. In return, I tell him about Irving, who lived below me when I was newly 20 and living away from home for the first time. Irving was a man in his 40s, married to a neat little German wife, Antje. I remember she used to clip her lawn with scissors as some kind of meditative act. I would watch her from my window making her way across the scrubby tenement garden. Her feet were minuscule, upturned where she knelt. They had the tiniest, pinkest heels I'd ever seen. She was always inviting me in for herbal tea and homemade fruitcake, doused in all kinds of alcohol. That was how I met Irving. He was loud compared to her quiet, obnoxious compared to her observant, and he had eyes that dismembered me limb by limb, throwing away my useless parts, which seemed to be almost all of them. Inexplicably, he was a lumberjack, and had to drive out of the city each day for work, leaving early, arriving late, sparsely seen during the day. He smelled like sweat and sap. His skin was dry. He made me feel unclean. We did it in their shed while Antje was taking a migraine nap. He wore his leather lumberjack gloves and spanked me a lot. In retrospect, I think I was more curious about her. She was really lovely, but he was more accessible. You like women? Moses asks. No, I bristle, folding my arms. No, I liked Antje. I wanted to know her. It just seemed hard to think of reasons to go over.
Hi, my name is Genevieve Jagger, and this is my debut novel, Fragile Animals. Fragile Animals is about a woman named Noelle who is in the midst of a breakdown when she travels to the Isle of Bute, where she meets Moses, a man who claims to be a vampire. She decides to believe him, and a relationship ensues between them based on confession of ex-lovers. It's also a book about Catholicism and doctrine and rules and religion. The highlight of my debut publishing experience has been getting to go to the queer bookshop in Glasgow that I go to buy books anyway, and see them stock my book, to get to sign copies with them. When I was writing a book, that was the main location that I wanted my book to be sold in. I mean, it's very exciting that it's in other bookshops. You can get it lots of places, but specifically Category is just everything they stand for, and getting to actually like be a queer author in the queer bookshop and kind of be held by that space is an amazing thing. So I have two favorite books that I've read in 2024. One of them is The Lamb by Lucy Rose, which I was lucky enough to read as a proof copy. It's coming out next year, and it's about the daughter of a cannibal, and it's horrific, but like also really brutally tender. And I just feel like it's going to be one of these books that everybody's talking about. Or Deliver Me by Elle Nash, which is body horror at its most brutal. Elle has this like amazing ability to write about some really like terrifying and disturbing things in a way that still feels like useful and beautiful, and like really lingers with you. So go read Deliver Me and go read The Lamb. Thank you very much.